Welcome to day 4 of Streaming Media East Connect 2021. This is our 4th virtual event, and it won't be our last. We'll be doing another Streaming Media Connect in August, but our plans are to return to an in-person event with Streaming Media West in Huntington Beach in November. So we hope to see some of you there. If you're interested in speaking at that event, the call for speakers is open. And if you're interested in sponsoring, that information can also be found at the link that Steve Nathans-Kelly has just posted in the chat. As always, all of our sessions will be available on demand on our YouTube channel. Steve's also going to post the link to that in the chat. And you can also go to streamingmedia.com and click on the cleverly titled tab video and pull down to conference videos and find all of our videos there. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor, Signient, for making all of Streaming Media East Connect possible. And we've got a short video message from them now.
When the director calls action.
And action.
When the game is on.
Pick it up, it's good.
Or it's time to save the universe again. Media Shuttle is there. Trusted by more than 25,000 media companies, Media Shuttle delivers, making it easy and secure to send any size file anywhere fast. The journey begins with Media Shuttle portals, customized and branded for any project and designed to be so easy, your end users will love it. All while giving operations teams complete control through a simple yet powerful admin interface. Add users, set permissions, customize file delivery specs, and report on all activity. Blast off with proprietary acceleration technology. Media Shuttle moves your content anywhere in the internet-connected world at hyper speeds. Along the way, your files are protected. Our commitment to enterprise-grade security has made Media Shuttle a preferred tool with Hollywood studios, major sports leagues, broadcasters, and more. With Media Shuttle, your files are never handed over to Signient. File movement is orchestrated between the end user's workstation and your storage, whether on-prem or in the cloud. Your IT team simply provisions your storage, connecting it to the Media Shuttle cloud service, and Signient handles the rest. Get started on your Media Shuttle journey today. A journey without limits.
I would also like to thank the sponsor of this session, Digital Element, for helping make this possible. We're going to be talking for the next hour about audience targeting, privacy, and data. It's one of the biggest challenges and biggest opportunities for OTT providers, striking that balance between the audience data that they need to target that audience with the content and advertising that that those viewers want, but also being very aware of privacy concerns and not creeping people out. So as I said, we've got a terrific group of speakers, and I'll just introduce them by name and ask them to tell us a little bit about what they do. First up is Sue Kelsay, who is the Senior VP of Marketing, Technology, and Operations for HBO Max. Sue, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Sue. I work at HBO Max, which is the streaming service for Warner Media. We have all sorts of great content like HBO and Warner Brothers content, DC Comics content, Turner Classic Movies. So something for everybody. And my team, we put the data in data marketing. I lead data, technology, and platform strategy and execution for marketing to drive our goals of acquisition and retention.
Perfect. Natasha Templeton is the Vice President for Advertising and New Media for Digital Element. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thanks for having me. As you said, my name is Natasha, and I'm with Digital Element. I've been with the company for about 19 years now, and we are the global leader for IP intelligence solutions. We tend to power a lot of advertising platforms, streaming platforms, et cetera, and I manage a lot of those partnerships and relationships.
Excellent. And CJ Bangah, who's a partner for technology and media and telecommunications at PwC. Welcome, CJ.
Thank you. It is an absolute honor to be here. And I have a few different hats I wear with PwC. I lead consulting projects with companies at the intersection of tech and media, including streaming providers and digital advertising publishers, but I also do some of our white papers and thought leadership. So I sit on our Entertainment Media Outlook Global Editorial Board, and look at trends in the space, and have been tracking streaming and other things for quite a few years. And I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. We're excited to have all of you. And let's jump right in with a sort of big picture question, but one that I think gets at the heart of the opportunities and the challenges. How do you find the right balance, again, between targeting viewers with the content and the advertising that's relevant to them, but not creeping them out and not violating their privacy? Let's start with you, Sue.
I mean, we want consumers to know what companies are using their data for and why they're getting the types of messaging that they are, so that they can be in control of what companies do with their data. But we also need to continue to evolve, on our side to meet marketing and media goals and serve them content that our consumers want while respecting their privacy preferences. So I think it really comes down to transparency, like the consumers understanding what data we're collecting on them, what it's used for, and that they know that we respect their preferences. Like, we don't use any kids' profile data for marketing. We don't sell their data. Like, we do everything we can to gain our consumers' trust.
Natasha, could you speak to that?
I mean, I think that's great. I think you hit on really a key point, which is transparency. I mean, I think that, as a viewer, honestly, it's an exchange, right? And I love that you have enough data in order to provide me with a more customized experience. But I do think that transparency is the key, and it's not something that historically we've always had, as consumers. And so I think it's great that platforms and advertisers, et cetera, are moving more toward, in that direction of transparency.
CJ?
I think this is one of my favorite topic areas, because you run into the boundaries of human cognition and this interesting juxtaposition between humans have a tendency to think that tech companies are collecting a lot more and know a lot more about them than they actually are, and then have this presumption of personalized, relevant experiences that are augmented by AI that don't always align to the data that's being connected. We did a study, PwC did a study way back in 2014 on mobile advertising and what data consumers were willing to give up to get a discount, better recommendations on content and other things. And 3% of them at the time said, I'll give you my social security number. So I think pulling the thread on what Sue is saying and pulling the thread on what Natasha is saying, there's clearly an industry imperative to not take more data than you need to deliver the experience that the consumer expects at the value they expect. And there's also clearly still a pretty wide chasm between how companies are using data and engaging consumers and the bad, undereducated assumptions some consumers are making on what data is and is not being used and who they can always trust with that information.
Right. I was speaking with someone who worked in data and security, calls himself a hacker. So make of that what you will. But, he brought up the valid point, and this was specifically around Alexa and voice devices, right? He brought up the point that if you got one of these in your pocket, there's more data being collected there just by having one of those than most of these services are collecting. But like you said, CJ, people make the leap that Alexa's listening to everything, or that the apps and services they're subscribing to are taking a lot more data than they actually are. But here's another question about balance. How narrow and I guess it's about targeting with that data, how narrow do you go with that data that you collect to make sure that you're really customizing what's delivered, be it content or advertising, to customers, without excluding them from other content that they might want, other ads that might be relevant. People want things that are relevant to them, but they also maybe don't want to be pigeonholed or don't want to miss out on things that, if you are too granular with that data, they might miss out on.
This is also another interesting area too. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, CJ.
All right, we'll get started. And for those that are in the audience, we have a happy coincidence. All of our panelists realize we were born in the same state, so hopefully we'll all be gracious, as our Georgian roots suggest. I think that, you know, when you look at the segmentation of audiences, and when you think about what you need to actually target them, again, you can run into that same juxtaposition we were just talking about, where we as consumers and we as humans sometimes have this presumption that I'm a segment of one. Like, you know everything about me, you're listening to me all the time. Like, you should only be showing me things that are curated for me, relevant to me, and, you know, things that like I'm going to want to see. The reality from, you know, a platform perspective, or the reality from a tech or publisher perspective, is you don't need to get down to a segment of one level to have relevant and impactful messages and advertising and just, you know, engagement with your consumers. Eric, to your point on what's the right level of audience targeting and like what's the right way to look at those dimensions, unfortunately, I think the answer is it depends. It's going to depend on what your purpose is, what type of content you're dealing with, what kind of services and offerings you have. Generally speaking, if you're talking about demographic detail, you know, age, location, other types of factors, that in some ways is becoming less helpful than contextual or intent or outcome or psychographic detail, right? What is the consumer trying to do when they're interacting with me in this experience? And so I think demographics still have a role to play in the future of, you know, 18 to 24-year-old people in this location that may have these types of interests. But I think more and more, particularly as the AI algorithms get more sophisticated, it's going to be a lot more about context, a lot more about experience enhancers and enablers, and a little bit less about chunks of different kind of groupings of people, up to and including segment of one. Natasha, hopefully that's an okay launching point for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it ties in, you know, pretty nicely. I think from my perspective, I think this is a really good question, because I think, you know, balance is really key here, in my opinion. I think that there is such beauty in those shared events, you know, all the things that go viral and, you know, all of that. And I think especially in this COVID area, you know, we were talking before the call, you know, people have been pretty isolated. And I think that we have found a really shared community in some of these big tentpole events that you were referring to. You know, different shows were going viral and people felt pretty unified, you know, and sharing those experiences. But I think also, to share the other side of it, who hasn't sat around and argued as a family over what to watch? And so I think that there's so much great content and so many shows right now, especially now, that I don't think that people really want to waste their time digging through a lot of content that isn't very relevant to them. So I do think that balance is key. And CJ, I think that ties in, you know, with our business as well. When you were talking about the segment of one from an IP perspective, it's a bit more pulled back, it's a bit more scaled back. And so, you know, within our business, what we found is that our data kind of has the ability to help interpret at a broader level, but then also at a more granular level, depending on what the goals are of the platform or the advertiser, the brand, et cetera. So we've, I mean, we've really just taken the stance of putting the power back in the hands of our clients to decide that. Sorry, Sue.
Oh, no, sorry. I wanted you to finish your thought. I mean, really, we do a combination of both. So across our one-to-one messaging, I mean, we do have one-to-one messaging and we have tentpole messaging. So everyone gets the announcements about our big tentpole titles and our new releases. And, you know, we try to help our consumers with the discovery process of finding new content. I mean, our library has, you know, this breadth and depth, and, you know, we want to make sure that everyone knows about all of the great content, you know, especially if it's new. So it becomes this kind of mix of art and science, right? So we want to suggest all of the art and all of the new titles and big titles that we have coming out, but we also have a personalized recommendation engine that is one-to-one. So based on, you know, a user's history, they get specific recommendations that are curated just for them. And so when you log onto our app, there's a combination of like the big titles that everyone sees, curated categories from our editorial curation team. But then there's also a personalized For You tray. So in that For You tray, that is, you know, one-to-one based on our predictive algorithms, you know, that help each user try and discover like deep into our catalog, things that might be interesting to them based on what they've watched before. So, you know, we try and hit everything all at the same time.
Well, let's talk a little bit more specifically then about HBO Max. You know, we're fortunate enough to have you here, Sue, and HBO Max is one of the biggest brands in the OTT space. So it makes sense to spend a little bit of time talking specifically about what HBO Max has done. I mean, first of all, you launched HBO Max in the middle or right at the beginning of the pandemic, a little over a year ago, right?
Yes, yes.
So can you talk a little bit about your experience building out your marketing technology and operations team and launching the app at that, to coin a phrase, unprecedented time?
I mean, like everybody, we had to make the transition to working remotely. But I think what was different for us is that it came at a really key time for HBO Max. I was just starting to form our team, so we had to hire most of our team remotely. So, you know, I still never met a lot of our team in person. So, you know, that sounds normal now, but at the time, you know, we were all transitioning. So it was all kind of new. We were in the midst of interviews. And then, you know, as we were building up our team, we launched our service from home. We were literally all at home, like, are we really going to do this, like working remotely? So we ramped up the team quickly. We hired a lot of talented folks from, you know, diverse backgrounds and skill sets. So we have this great, robust team, and I do believe we built a best-in-class marketing stack. We built a lot on what we had already done. My former job at Warner Brothers, part of the Warner Media Company, and also HBO. But with everyone working remotely, it's just an additional challenge of doubling down on communication, on team building, especially when everyone is new and has never met each other in person. But to make sure that everyone's marching towards the same vision of what we're trying to build and what we're trying to do. And so we just had to, you know, repeat over and over what we're doing. We're optimizing growth, we're optimizing engagement, and we have to do that through personalized, you know, full life cycle messaging, which is, you know, what we're talking about here, using consumer data to personalize the experience as much as possible.
And how is HBO Max sort of uniquely positioned to build out audience profiles and individual viewer profiles to aid in the streamer's overall growth?
So, I mean, we have a very large and talented data science team that's dedicated just to audience development and predictive models. You know, their purpose is solely to personalize our messaging and our activation. And those models, you know, help us optimize our growth and engagement. When I transitioned from Warner Brothers to HBO Max, I moved away from having to rely a lot on third-party data. You know, as a streamer, we have access, like, there's a streaming treasure trove of data, of first-party data, of what consumers watch, what they click on, you know, whether they have you know, multiple profiles in the household or just one. So it's really like a true full 360 view, you know, of the consumer journey. And so we just have, you know, our data scientists, they work on modeling, you know, predictive behavior, engage whether our customers are going to churn, whether they're going to be interested in a new title. There's just, you know, constant work going on audience profiling.
But before we move on, I'm curious, you know, just over a year after launching HBO Max, you're also moving towards launching the AVOD version of that. And how is integration with, how is your profiling going to change once you're working, you know, in an AVOD environment? And that might lead into, you know, because Natasha, I know you work closely with both media and advertising. Talk about how content publishers and advertisers can work together to build profiles.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'll
sorry,
start.
was that to me or to Sue?
Yeah.
Go for it,
Yeah,
Sue.
sorry, I kind of brought both of you into
That's
that
okay.
one, but
No problem.
so Sue, go ahead, I think.
Okay, so I'll start and then I'll hand it over to you, Natasha. So, I mean, OTT advertising is an industry, it's seeing double-digit growth every year. You know, people continue to cut the cord from traditional TV and cable. So advertising budgets keep going up because, you know, more people are on those devices. HBO Max, we announced just yesterday, so breaking news, at our Warner Media upfronts, that we're debuting our ad-supported subscription tier the first week of June, so really just within weeks. And it gives our consumers a choice of the SVOD service or the lower price HBO Max with ad service. And that just makes the service accessible to more households because it's at a lower price point. And I feel like that's what advertising allows, right? It gives consumers that choice. Natasha, I'll hand it over to you now.
I think, and I can only speak to my, perspective here, but, for us, we try to think of our data as, very customizable and something that can be built upon. And so we do play a lot within the streaming industries, and then we also play a lot within the ad industries. And I think that for them to be able to bring in IP data internally and kind of build off of that, I think just kind of helps them keep control over how that data is being applied, universally throughout their platforms.
It's also an interesting area because, Sue, you chatted about the growth, the double-digit growth opportunity with OTT advertising. And it's one of those areas that comes up all the time when I'm talking to folks, whether it's media or my clients or just doing general industry presentations on PwC's entertainment media outlook, because, we look at this industry and it's a $2.1 trillion industry. And the TV subscription revenue side of the house is typically associated with, like a slightly negative or very slightly positive growth rate. And there are always questions on like, well, when is streaming going to take that revenue that's traditionally been directed towards some of the linear TV sources and fully move it to streaming? And, when we did the Interactive Advertising Bureau Internet Revenue Report for last year, some, when the pandemic first hit, thought digital advertising was going to decline, right? And it did. For the first half of last year, it went down. But by the time you looked at the second half of the year, not only did it recover, but it exceeded growth from the prior period. So digital advertising in the US was a $139 billion business last year, and video was the segment that gained share, right? So it's one of these really interesting things where there is so much growth in digital advertising, and some of that growth is being enabled by the proof points of how awesome OTT is, right? You can have those direct connections with consumers. You can understand the content they want, the experiences want, the ads they like and don't like. You can use shorter form ads. You can use ads that are more personalized and more relevant and more contextual and enable action, right? Like, I don't know where we'll land with shoppable ads and QR codes and all of that kind of stuff, but you're collecting such rich information about the kinds of content and experiences consumers love and who they are and why they like those content and experiences that just are a powerhouse of insight that really, I think, is going to continue to help drive that double-digit growth, where digital advertising, particularly digital video, gets its quote unquote fair share of this over $2 trillion industry, whereas right now, it's got a very big growth rate, but it's still a relatively small total revenue base.
Yeah, I feel like, the advertising in this space, it has that premium quality, especially when you're watching on your television through your Apple TV or your Roku device or through your smart TV. It has the same like premium feel and quality and impact that, linear television commercials have, but, with the added bonus of it being addressable, targeted, potentially even contextual on top of that. So like the contextual plus the addressable really just makes it, it's such a valuable industry for advertising right now.
Well, and I don't way back when, when I was doing research and, the major that I neglected to ultimately get, my business major with my computer science minor, but like way back in the day, if you looked back at like Shakespearean times, when Shakespeare and others were like planning their plays, they would discover things like, oh, people like dogs, right? Like if we put a dog in the play and the dog does something funny and it trips, then the audience laughs, right? And one of the things I really, really love about some of the streaming services and the data that we're getting is it's almost like what's old is new again, right? You've gone to the point where you can say, oh, like audiences are exiting here, or they're really watching all the way through here, or people are binging this kind of content and they're okay waiting for that kind of content. So like it's the opportunity of technology to finally have that super personalized, meaningful type of entertainment that we've moved away from with scale, and now we get to go back to with data. I just think it's such a cool thing.
Absolutely. And you mentioned different types of targeting. So CJ, I'd like to start with you on this question, but again, everyone should feel free to answer. What types of targeting are you finding in your research are most effective? And then we'll come back in a minute with which types are least effective, but let's start with what works.
I think the targeting that comes through as being the most effective is the targeting that is, and this is kind of a somewhat unsatisfying answer, Eric, so forgive me, but like the targeting that is the least intrusive and the most accretive. And so when we're working with our clients on approaching the ecosystem and competing and differentiating in the space, it's easy to say, and I'm going to give an example that is a real life example from another industry panel I participated on, but I appreciate it sounds like it could be made up. So there was a company that had a movie studio that had a new release, and they came to the publisher and they said, I want to target people of Asian descent who like strategy games for this movie release, right? And the conversation in this example was like, well, we don't have that kind of targeting. And oh, by the way, is that even the right target? And so I think the targeting that works the best is the targeting that goes underneath the hood a little bit on, it's not about just demographic details. It's not about, what we think or the stereotypes that we're making on the types of people that are going to be interested in this new film. It's the targeting that actually, finds the right way of balancing with consumer journeys, which by the way, have also changed. It's no longer a consumer journey, it's consumer spaghetti, like funnels getting collapsed if they even exist at all, if you believe in the marketing funnel. So I think a lot of this, like when you think about targeting, it's, okay, what do we have? And then let's engage in a two-way conversation with the publishers that we're thinking about advertising with, or the publishers that we're thinking about working with, to understand who they have, and then find the way to match our data models up in a compliant way to kind of get underneath the targeting that works for us. Because Eric, in some cases, targeting, like if it's a big, superhero blockbuster, or if it's a niche foreign language film, or if it's all these things are going to have a different targeting algorithm that is right for them. There is no one size fits all model on targeting, and it really will be nuanced depending on what type of thing you're looking at. But it needs to be a listening discussion and dialogue between brands, marketers, agencies, and publishers to get to the right targeting engine.
Sue or Natasha, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with everything that CJ said. So, I mean, I'm gonna just tackle the most and least effective at the same time. It's hard to talk about one without the other. But yeah. I think, similar to what I was saying before, the most effective is really targeting that's based on, what the user behavior and what that they actually do. The least effective being, for us at least as a streamer, and it's kind of a funny pet peeve of mine, it's really like demographics, right? So I feel like so many, it's kind of like the step one of audience targeting, like, oh, we have a great rom-com coming out, we're going to target it to, someone like me, like a 40-something-year-old female. I mean, I just want to say, like, as that demographic, I don't like rom-coms. Like, if you look at my behavior, I watch sci-fi and fantasy, maybe against stereotype a little bit, but that's what I watch. And if you look at my behavior, that's what you would know that, and you would cater the correct type of programming to me. And, it is not just me, right? Like, we have Gossip Girl, our Gossip Girl reboot coming up in July. And, it's like a steamy teen drama. And there are plenty of adult men who love the guilty pleasure of a teen drama. So, instead of targeting against demographics, I just feel like, in a business like ours, it really, it's certainly more important to understand people's content preferences and their behavior and what they've done before and what they watch. You know, we're far beyond, you know, demographics on you know, personalizing content to people.
Yeah, it's also, and Sue, I'm going to pull the thread on the rom-com example, because I personally, same demographic, but I do like rom-coms, but only certain types, right? And I also love science fiction and I love action movies. And so you get into this interesting thing though, where, you know, like I will use my husband's account on some services because it gives me better recommendations than my account, because I'll make the mistake of like watching too much of the same thing. And I really do like a broader blended portfolio of content and entertainment. And so it drives my poor husband crazy because he's like, what is this? Like, what is this doing? Have you been watching my login versus yours? And I was like, well, yeah, because I started this thing and I just wanted to finish it. So outside of folks that mess up their, you know, loved ones' profiles, I do think that that sophistication and that deeper understanding of human nature and avoiding putting, and Eric, this is also answering the what doesn't work, avoid trying to put people in these very narrow boxes of because you're this age or this gender or have this identity or this culture or, you know, what have you not, you must like this. It's not the case at all. And we know that's not the case at all. And so then when you're trying to optimize your targeting strategies and you're trying to find the right, you know, partners to work with, it really does involve a much more, you know, candid and transparent conversation where, so if you're HBO Max, it's not that you're going to give every brand marketer all the data that you have, but you can talk about the characteristics and the behaviors of the people that are on HBO Max and find the right fit for whatever their objective is. But if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I want this very specific list of things, it may not match to how, you know, your team is organizing the data. And so that's where, again, Eric, I think the best targeting is the targeting that brings two companies together on a shared purpose and shared outcomes. The worst targeting is the targeting where somebody has like a punch list of, oh, I think this is exactly what I'm looking for. And that may or may not match to the data algorithmic models of whomever you're talking with. And oh, by the way, it may not even be the right lens to take.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're jumping into this larger conversation that I feel like we're having in the world about assumptions that we make on people in general. And the interesting thing about, I think, particularly the TV and movie world is that we're starting to have more storytellers, right? Like we're getting much more stories told by women, more stories told by people of color that haven't traditionally been very represented. And what we're finding is that no, not everyone is the same. Not all women like the same things. Not all people in a certain race like all things. And so it's definitely, I mean, I don't think you were intending to go in that direction, but that's kind of where we're at, right? I mean, as in the world stage, we're starting to have much more of these conversations that you're right, just looking at, you know, women in, you know, age 40 to 52 is not going to get you into your correct bucket.
Right. And, you know, that brings up a really compelling question, and it wasn't on my list, but I'm going to ask it as a follow-up. You know, as there's a bigger discussion about corporate responsibility, and particularly when it comes to issues surrounding diversity and getting those work from those creators who might not typically be in the mainstream out to a broader audience. I'm curious as to what sort of discussions are going on, you know, in meetings at a place like HBO Max about, okay, we don't, you know, we need to get work from women and the BIPOC community out to a broader audience, and that goes against type, that pushes against demographics, and might push against a little bit where the data you collected might tell you to go. Does that make sense?
I mean, HBO Max, I mean, if you look through our platform, we really strive to represent, you know, a lot of diverse voices. We pride ourselves in getting content creators that represent diverse voices. So it's all about giving consumers a choice, right? Like, we're not going to force any content on anyone. All the content is there. We kind of the balance we were talking before about, you know, showing everybody all of our new content, all of our trending content, all of, the big tentpole titles, we show that to everyone. And then, there are also the personalized titles. And so we really give our creators a platform and a voice. And then from that point on, it's up to our consumers, to decide what it is that they want to see and what they don't want to see. But we very much pride ourselves in, giving, really showing a very rich and diverse set of content for everybody.
Natasha and CJ, does the diversity discussion play into your conversations that you're having with your clients?
For me, it does. And I think, PwC has taken a pretty strong and very market committed stand on diversity. So we have the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, which lays out very specific goals and objectives, and we hold ourselves accountable to it. And we also, our CEOs worked with other CEOs to sign the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. And it's everything from the colleges we recruit from, the leadership profiles that we have, the development that we give to our people. So internal to PwC, it's a very big conversation. And then more and more, it's coming up not only with C-suite, not only with boards, but CVPs and directors and all different layers of organizations are bringing this up more and more. And really, I think the tone in the vast majority of cases is, I need to understand what I can do. And, we still have businesses to run, but how do I be a responsible corporate citizen that is making sure that while I can't fix everything that is wrong with the reason that we are where we are today and the reason this has to be such an important focus for everyone as people and as professionals on this planet, I think a lot of those conversations though really do go into, what's the journey and how do we get to where we should be, acknowledging that it's highly complicated. There's so many factors that contribute to it. So you end up getting, the community element, including donations, including, support for at-risk organizations. You get the inside the company wall element of how do we attract, retain, develop, and grow? What supplemental programs do we need for diverse folks? You get the how do we direct our dollars to diverse communities? How do we find creators and make sure that we're empowering them? So it's, sorry, a little long-winded, long story short, yes, it comes up all the time, different angles of where it starts. And I think, it's on the radar of so many movers and shakers. And I think it's going to be here to stay. But ideally, I think we're going to start to get more wins under our belt and just see better representation, better treatment, and better mobility when we look at people that are non-characteristic of maybe what we expected from the past.
Yeah, Eric, to answer your question, I really hope we're all talking about this. We are a much smaller company than the companies that these guys work with. We're a fraction of their size. So I think for us, it's a less of a formalized structure. I think it's great. Our original founders have just naturally gravitated toward hiring very diverse talent. And then I think that, one of our main founders, as a person, really values elevating people in general and then bringing opposing viewpoints to the table. Like, as a person, that's who he is. He wants to bring all these different perspectives and different voices to the table, which has translated very nicely into, diversity. And so that is something that we think about. And of course, over the last year, it's gone much more onto the global stage. And it's something that I think we're all talking about in everyday conversation, and not just, oh, we've got to check a diversity and inclusion box, right? So, I think we're all talking about it more. How do you message in a way that doesn't inadvertently leave people out? All those different kinds of conversations. And I love that we're all talking about it.
Yeah. And thank you for going off script there with me for a little bit, but, and thank you, Natasha, for kind of opening the door. It occurred to me that over 4 days, this is an issue that we haven't talked about much here at Streaming Media East Connect, and we need to talk about it more.
Yeah, I think there's two fronts to that D&I issue, right? It's very, like what I was mentioning before about like the content creation and giving voices to creators. And then it is about like the hiring and your peers and your management. And, there's a huge emphasis on that at Warner Media. And, again, like like my peers were saying here, not to check boxes, but we very much feel that by giving a voice, both, on the corporate side and on the content side, to as diverse a group of people as possible, it helps us as a company put our best foot forward.
Absolutely. Getting back a little more toward the topic of the panel, none of this targeting would be possible without IP data. And Natasha, you brought a really good point up when we were planning the questions. How does IP data actually protect the viewer's privacy? All we hear about is how data being collected violates users' privacy, but how can IP data protect users' privacy?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you for mentioning the importance of IP. I love that. But no, I think that, the reason why a lot of our streaming clients rely on IP is because it doesn't require personally identifiable information in order to work. I think I mentioned this earlier in the discussion that it is just a little bit pulled back or a little bit removed from the end user. So you can, using IP data, you can gain some location context, some geographic context, and then of course append other data sets to get a much clearer picture of the audience, really without, cookies or ingesting anything personal about the end user. For our solution, we don't get any more granular than the zip or the postal code level. And that information really comes more from analyzing network patterns than analyzing, any specific users per se.
Any follow-ups on that? That's fine.
You guys aren't IP experts?
Well, I just think you stated it. I think you stated it well. And again, I think if you're looking at a tech stack and you're looking at, the connection all the way up through the app, there's different ways that you target at different altitudes of details. But yeah, I do think IP is kind of one of those. It's a powerful tool in the toolkit, and I don't know why it kind of gets a bad rap sometimes. So.
Mm-hmm. Are you finding that customers, consumers are becoming more comfortable with sharing their data or less comfortable? And I guess, Natasha, let's start with you on that one, but I'm guessing everyone has got some thoughts on that.
I think that we can really look at other industries to learn some lessons around this. I mean, for instance, if you take the gaming industry, gaming is a very personal experience. Users are very actively engaged in the game. So the data is really showing that people, when they're in game, are starting to realize the value in advertising. And I think that does come down to AI and being very clever about the way that advertising is being layered into the gaming experience. But someone can really see something that's interesting. Maybe they're driving through the game and they see a billboard with a brand, on the backside of it. But it's interesting and it's more inclusive, helps with brand recognition, all that. But what we're seeing with our clients is that if you're targeting people correctly, then it actually improves the overall experience. It creates a more intimate experience, and just improves the whole thing, overall. And so I think that in the streaming world, those lessons can be sort of applied from other industries. At the end of the day, I mean, I think it's really a value exchange. And so user data really has to be earned. And so if you're providing something of value, then it can improve the experience. I just think it'd be great if, we embrace the challenges that we're experiencing in the market to create better advertising overall.
I mean, I think in general, as an industry, consumers are becoming savvier about controlling their own data. Like, they're starting to understand the value of their own data and the footprint that, they create as, they're going through apps and websites and such. So I think they're becoming savvier about like who has access to it and how companies have access to it. I think what we've seen, we've been tracking a lot of the like iOS 14 launches and what that's going to do for consumer data collection in the industry. And what we've seen so far is that for apps and services, companies that consumers are familiar with and they trust, they're willing to share their data because, again, there's this transparency of what we're going to do with it, that, no one is doing anything, nefarious with it. Apps that they're not as familiar with, or that they haven't built that trust yet, a lot of consumers are starting to click no when asked to share their data just because they're becoming savvier. So it's, still on us as companies to earn that trust, just like Natasha was saying.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you guys have said. I will also say, while I previously mentioned demographics are not a perfect proxy for targeting and should not be used that way. They can play a role, but they're part of a bigger picture. I do think demographics and consumers' attitudes for data, there's correlation there, right? So when we do some of our research around like VideoQuake, which was looking at the streaming services, and when we do other research that looks at how much information consumers are willing to share and then what they expect in return, the younger demographic has grown up with a smartphone and they've grown up with internet connections, and the information that they are okay sharing, whether it's posting on social media about what they had for breakfast or clicking through and giving their data to an app, is actually quite different than the information I'm willing to share, right? And how I approach it. So I do think I agree with everything you guys have said. I also think it can vary. Again, there's a correlation to demographics. Demographics are not a perfect proxy for it. But it is a little bit of a generational divide on how much consumers are willing to share and what they expect in return.
Well, and one of the reasons that consumers are occasionally wary about sharing their data is that there have been any number of well-publicized data breaches and cyber attacks. And as the risks and consequences from those, whether they be directly financial or to brand reputation, continue to grow, what sort of impacts do you anticipate on the data that companies collect and how they're able to use that data? So CJ, that's a question we sort of built collaboratively. So let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, when PwC does an annual CEO survey every year, and 78% of the surveyed CEOs said they plan to invest more in their cybersecurity profile. And I think, Eric, when we were talking about this question, one of the things we were battling was cause and effect, right? Mm-hmm. Does your cybersecurity risk increase because you're collecting, in many cases, more data about your users and consumers to create more personalized and relevant experiences, ads, so on and so forth? And I kind of told you that the cybersecurity profile is increasing for a lot of reasons, including some governments funding cybersecurity to go after intellectual property, the availability of accelerators and tools that are posted online. Like, you do not have to be a PhD in computer science to be a hacker, right? Like, you can go to sites and download and kind of build your own cybersecurity profile. And the consumers going online, and by the way, the pandemic accelerated digital adoption, means their dollars are online. There's more good stuff to steal. And so when you look at streaming and you look at data and you say, do we need to be more focused on cybersecurity? Well, absolutely. The risk profile is going up, and cyber criminals are getting more sophisticated and it's easier to be more sophisticated. And just so much money is going through online channels that it just makes it a very attractive target. And if you're not planning to focus on it, that's probably not the right decision for any company on the planet right now, or even people on the planet, right? Basic things like not clicking on bad emails and changing passwords are really, really important, and they don't always get the appropriate amount of attention.
Yeah, I mean, at our company, we've taken great strides to protect our consumer data. I mean, we don't collect anything beyond what we need to run our service. But even within our own teams, the only people who have access to any consumer data are those that need it for their job function. To combat any PII, getting into the wrong hands. We anonymize all of our data for our internal staff. So, anybody who's working with our data day to day, like our data science team, our marketing analytics teams, and our product teams, we don't make PII available widely. We anonymize everything. They're kind of working with, these anonymous IDs and their their data profiles, but nobody sees names or addresses or emails, certainly not financial information. So we protect it as much as possible from within our own company. And then again, like just like CJ was saying, the investment that goes into protection at a greater level at a company just keeps growing because it has to.
Yeah, something kind of adjacent to what CJ said is I think that, all around, it's just important that we get all of this correct, and not just consumer data, but also as a company, protecting our intellectual property, our software. And, a couple of days ago, I saw an article, this is a little bit more related in my world, but I saw an article where a large enterprise was fined $8 million because they were being a bit careless about software downloads, and it was going into these, getting into the hands of sanctioned, jurisdictions and these embargoed countries, and they were fined a pretty hefty fine for just not putting basic, geographic restrictions around where their software could be downloaded. So it's, at this point, I think it's just there's no room to get a B or a C grade right now, right? Got to bring our A game.
Right. We've got a really great audience question, and then I'll ask you all to sort of dust off the crystal balls and predict the future a little bit. But an audience member is asking, in the context of privacy versus efficiency in marketing, how do you compare active consumer targeting versus providing AI-based passive search functionality when searching a movie catalog, for instance? As a user, I would personally like less private information processed and exploited for marketing actively, but I don't mind some passive use and improved search functionality, for example, when I want to watch a movie.
I'll jump on this one first. I think the word that the audience member used of exploited, I think, is the heart of the problem. If people feel like their data is being used in a way that is not accretive and beneficial to them, you have no right to collect it, or in the future, right? Like, I think if you cannot show as an organization a direct correlation between I collect this information and this is why it benefits the consumer and this is the value it adds to the consumer, I think the pressure is going to rise, whether it's regulatory or consumer sentiment or otherwise, to not collect that data any longer. I will tell you the hope, and Natasha made this point earlier, that advertising needs to get a heck of a lot better for many industries and many parts of the industry. The hope is that with the right information collection, not only can I use AI to curate really meaningful experiences and content, and Sue gave the example of how HBO structures it, right? You've got the big release pane, you have the personalized recommendation pane. Like, there's different ways where the consumer can be in the driver's seat with how they engage and find content, but their information is still curating this really great experience for them. If you imagine a world where advertisements are similarly curated, and the advertisement, if it's just a brand building campaign, could be a soda ad in the middle of the movie, but it's natural and I don't even really notice it, I'm not going to be up in arms about that. I'm going to be like, oh, cool. Like, that totally makes sense that, they're advertising Coke or Pepsi on the side of this pan, even though it's kind of intersposed in. The ads, and these are the ones that drive me personally bonkers, but like the ads that are like, weight loss ads, or like find a man ads, like some of the things I see, I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, first of all, it's none of your business. And second of all, like, no, right? So I think we've all had such terrible experiences with how our data is used against us that I feel like it creates this environment where it's almost hard to see a future where ads are accretive and create a better experience, because we've all gotten whatever, your own pet peeve is, but we've all gotten those ads that are like, okay, like, no, leave me alone. Like, I don't want to see it, right?
And I'm going to say, the data used for, kind of product development and product improvements and search activity, things like that, it's different from marketing activity. With marketing activity for any reputable company, you have the option as a consumer to opt out. You can opt out of, email and CRM communications. You can opt out of having your data used for media retargeting. And so if you feel, like your data is being exploited, I mean, really, like, choose that button and opt out of marketing communications and opt out of having consumers, of companies collecting your data. that is a power that should be within your control.
Natasha, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think she hit the nail on the head, is that
Right.
we do have the power, right? I mean, we have the power to opt out. And yeah, I think they both answered beautifully. I don't really have anything to add on top of that.
All right, well then let's close with, I'm going to ask you each over the next 12 to 24 months, what should industry observers be watching for in terms of trends or biggest challenges at the intersection of user data and OTT programming and advertising? Anyone want to go first? Just jump in.
I'll start and I'll say, I think, the thing in the next 18 to 24 months that I expect is going to grow in importance and attention is just the power of the consumers. Consumers now have enough, options to choose from. The companies that deliver great content and experiences and, don't violate that trust and show that they value and respect the consumers and they're trying to deliver, that ROI are going to do better. And those that, expect consumers to accept the status quo are gonna probably struggle, particularly with how competitive the market is getting.
Yeah, I mean, just as an entire industry of privacy, the rules keep changing. I mean, GDPR was, released a couple of years ago, CCPA now also. But on top of that, companies are starting to change their own rules about consumer privacy. So, we're marketers, but we're consumers too. So, it's a matter of, taking charge of your own profiles, your own data collection as a consumer. But as a company, we just have to continue to keep up with all of the different laws coming down and continue to, follow laws, but also respect a consumer's right to choose on, what data that they want collected, much like this question that came in from the audience. And so that's just an evolution that is, I believe, speeding up of just this kind of this emphasis on consumer data privacy. So that's something that we're going to be working through the changing laws and preferences over the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this really short. I think those were great. I mean, I think what we've been seeing with our clients is very similar. I mean, everyone's been working on, because there has been so many changes, let's build out our household graphs. Let's try to do that correctly. Let's also prepare for a world without cookies and then, all the other changes that have been going on. And so I think privacy is just going to be much more front and center even than it is now. And so we're just trying to stay on top of all of that, the regulations, but then also making decisions around what's just generally right, and then trying to support our customers, with those same goals.
Thank you so much, Sue, Natasha, CJ. That was a great discussion. We will be back in a half hour, and we're going to get technical with a couple of tech talks in 30 minutes. Thanks again to Signiant for being our diamond sponsor. And with that, we'll sign off.
When the director calls action.
And action.
When the game is on.
Pick it up. It's good.
Or it's time to save the universe again. Media Shuttle is there. Trusted by more than 25,000 media companies, Media Shuttle delivers, making it easy and secure to send any size file anywhere fast. The journey begins with Media Shuttle portals, customized and branded for any project and designed to be so easy, your end users will love it. All while giving operations teams complete control through a simple yet powerful admin interface. Add users, set permissions, customize file delivery specs, and report on all activity. Blast off with proprietary acceleration technology. Media Shuttle moves your content anywhere in the internet-connected world at hyper speeds. Along the way, your files are protected. Our commitment to enterprise-grade security has made Media Shuttle a preferred tool with Hollywood studios, major sports leagues, broadcasters, and more. With Media Shuttle, your files are never handed over to Signiant. File movement is orchestrated between the end user's workstation and your storage, whether on-prem or in the cloud. Your IT team simply provisions your storage, connecting it to the Media Shuttle cloud service, and Signiant handles the rest. Get started on your Media Shuttle journey today, a journey without limits.